Here in the Northern Rockies, dark winter months are outlasted in basements, dens, and nooks where kindred souls gather together to share intel, swap fly patterns, and relive the memories from seasons past. This gathering spot, known locally as the February Room, is the inspiration for this podcast. No matter the season, the door is always open to those with a fly fishing story to tell. Brought to you by CD Fishing USA, the North American distributor for composite development fly rods and accessories. 40 years of Kiwi ingenuity and graphite technology now available at cd-fishing.us or your local CD USA dealer. Follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. And remember to go fishing. Here's your host, the Carnops, and this is the February Room.
Scroll through an outfitter's page, you can normally get a good read on their expertise on their home waters. It's their bread and butter, of course. Sometimes, though, an outfitter will provide a hosted trip to a destination that is on every fly fishing enthusiast's bucket list. Today, my guest, Brett Wedeking of Tailout Anglers, based in Seattle, informs me more about managing both these operations. Thank you so much for joining me today, Brett.
Hi.
We have a lot to talk about today, but before we get into more about these hosted trips, which are obviously incredible, I've clicked the links and looked at these videos. I want to go to all of them. Let's hear more about, let's hear a fishing story.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for having me on. This is really exciting. I tried to think of a bunch of fishing stories. It's kind of funny when I was reading the outline. I was like, what do I have for fishing stories? And I was like, and then I started thinking, and I was like, I have so many stories, like some just weird, silly. I don't know. Being a guide is just full of craziness every single day.
Well, those are my favorite ones. So the silly ones are my favorite story. Like you could tell me about your big catch, but I want to hear the ones that are like crazy. Yeah.
So I used to guide in Alaska, out in Southwest Alaska on a Steelhead River out there. And we had two guys that came up. One had been there before and one hadn't. They were fishing together all week. And it's the ends of the earth out there. It's like, mountains with glaciers and huge bears running around all over and, black sand beaches. And it's crazy. And there's this volcano that's behind the lodge. I don't know, it's like 20 or 30 miles and it's got huge glaciers on it. And one fall it was erupting like almost nonstop through the entire season. And there's like flames shooting out of it and smoke and all sorts of stuff. It was just really surreal. And one day it was super foggy and we're driving upriver with these two guys and we hear it like booming, like thunderous booms, echoing through the tundra. And we didn't really know what was going on. And we were kind of just like, well, I guess if this is how it ends, this is, pretty cool place to be. We couldn't see anything. And we all kind of just looked at each other like,
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was wild. So we get up to this run and it's super long and it's full of fish. We knew where the fish are. And the one dude who's been there just jumps in the water and just starts wailing away. And I kind of coach the other guy and, get him in position. And 5 minutes later, he hooks and lands a steelhead. And he's like, this is just, wow, this is so cool and whatever. And I'm like, okay, yeah, so we take pictures and whatever. And I'm like, okay, like, cool, get back in there. And he's like, all right, yeah. And 10 minutes later, he catches another steelhead. And he's like, this is just like, it's so cool. And he sits down in the grass and he's like, all right, like, what's next? And I'm like, what do you mean, what's next? And he's like, well, I caught two fish. Like, what do we do now? Like, day's over, right? And I was like, what? And he's like, dude, I caught two fish in 2 years at home. And I was like, dude, get your rod, get back in the water and go catch another fish. And 5-10 minutes later, he catches another fish and another one and another one. And he's just like dumbfounded at what, like he didn't know, places like this existed. And to be fair, I mean, it's that whole region out there is the most spectacular place on earth, in a lot of ways. But it was just really funny, just the perspective. And he was just like, I'm done. It was just like day one too, like out of 6 days.
And was it still like rumbling as he's fishing? Is it still like
Oh yeah,
volcano.
yeah. And I mean, that part kind of stopped like, later in the day. It went back to just, when we could see again, just shooting fire and whatever. And mostly you could see it just at night. You see the flames and stuff. But yeah, and then the other guy, he's like, we called him Fist Bump because he every time he would, anything he would talk about or he'd catch a fish or anything like that, he would fist bump you, but like really hard, like punch you in the hand. And so he did it once to me, and I just said, don't ever do that to me again. And he kind of got upset about that. I didn't want anything to do. Yeah. I mean, he would like hit you like to your knuckles would bruise.
You're like, dude, I'm a fishing guide. I'm not an MMA fighter.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, let's just, let's go fish. It's great. So he, and he's just kind of a, happy-go-lucky, like, surfer kind of dude. And so every time he catches a fish, like I said, he'd been there before. He kind of knew the program. Every time he'd catch a fish, he'd pull out this roll up a bong that looked like a dildo, and no joke. And he would fill it with river water, and he would sit in the grass and just smoke a bowl and just kind of lay there in the grass for like 10 or 15 minutes or whatever, and then roll it back up, like pour the water out, roll it back up, put it in his pocket, and go back to fishing. He'd catch another fish and pull it back out and do the same thing.
You were just like basically guiding someone just to like have them like half the time just get like so high.
Oh yeah, totally. And I mean, that's kind of a normal part of fishing, but it was just like nonstop. It was just so funny. And he'd wade out like, just like chest deep every time and just like run through the river. I'm like, dude, the fish are behind you. He's like, no, I know where I'm doing. I'm going. Yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. And he'd catch fish just fine. But God, it was just so funny. Yeah. He'd just pull out this bong. It was like a latex, like rubbery dildo bong is what we called it, and fill it with river water.
Did he have a name for it?
No, I can't. Maybe he did. I can't remember. But it was like green, like neon green, or like glow in the dark green or something. I don't know. It was between
the volcano and the dildo bong. You're just like I'm
yeah.
Like,
and then the other
is this
guy
the way
like,
I want to end my life? And
I know.
Is this how I want my last day to be? Like they're having the best time, but you're like, is this the last thing I want to see?
Yeah, exactly. So I was, every day guiding in Alaska is something new and memorable, but that was just one of the kind of most funny and bizarre sorts of days in my career.
Oh my gosh. Well, Jess and I just came 2 weeks ago for the first time ever. I went to Alaska. Cool. I've never been to Alaska before. And we went fishing with Justin's buddy up there, AK Physiology, Mark Wackler. And it was off of Soldotna. We're on the Kenai. And so I've never experienced anything like that before in my life. First off, kind of that image that you were talking about, Alaska and these river, the Kenai is busy. I didn't realize how busy the Kenai is. And so I thought for sure, like I would be the only person in Alaska fishing this river and nobody would be there. And then that experience that you're talking about, like fishing, like we're fly fishing and we're on this boat and I was like casting and I think the first fish I have on is a pink. Yeah. And I was like, oh my gosh. Oh God, everybody come here, come close. Like I'm catching some fish on the fly and it's like a pink. And he's like, oh, it's a pink. And I was like, okay. And then like the next fish I catch is a pink. And then I finally get to the conclusion that pink are not awesome fish to catch on the Kenai. You shouldn't even take a picture of them. But in the very beginning, you're like, holy smokes, do you see this huge fish? Like, what is this? And then when I have a silver on and then Mark Wackler super stoked about it, I'm like, oh, okay. So now I've come to the conclusion that catching pink on the fly is not, it's like catching a white fish. Yeah. No one's really stoked about it, but catching a silver is amazing. And one of the coolest things though on this trip is that Jess and I went off the Kenai and kind of did our do it yourself. And we went to this river and we were swinging. Justin was swinging we were swinging for silvers because we hear there were silvers there, but randomly Justin had a steelhead.
Oh, cool.
And I guess it's really early in the season for that to happen. But when you get caught off guard like that, because we were like, oh, we're just going to catch some silver. And when Justin swung, he's like, wait a second, this is not a silver. This is
Oh, that's
actually
cool.
a steelhead.
Yeah.
It was so cool. And but yeah, like having that experience in Alaska, just catching so many fish where you, like you said, you don't get that anywhere in the world, other than Alaska. You can really manage to catch a lot of fish. And it was one of those experiences that I'll remember for my entire life. But yeah, I think that was, it was eye opening just how crazy that fishery is up there.
Perspective is a really important thing when you've lived up there or guided up there or fished or whatever. And, like you said, you caught a pink, around here, there's some people love pinks in the Northwest. I mean, we've got a pretty good pink salmon run every other year. And, some people just detest them, and it's kind of, I would, kind of the same in Alaska. But it's like, if the client or whoever it is, or, DIY fishing or whatever, and you catch a bunch of pinks, like, that's awesome. It's so cool. We get so jaded when you have that perspective. You're like, well, I caught 10 pinks and only 2 silvers. But like, yeah, but you caught, a dozen salmon a day. Like, how many people can say that?
Well, and also like the river, when we were on the anchor and we were doing it ourselves, we caught, I mean, no, like, because obviously there's more people on the river too. So you can see you have your section and your zone, and no one was really catching any fish. But Justin and I caught 2 pinks. I caught a silver, and it was awesome. I wouldn't change it for the world, even though it was very popular place.
It's a small river too.
There was plenty of but there was plenty of fish for everybody. Like, that's the thing I think that's so cool about Alaska is in Montana, if you're fishing the Clark Fork, you wouldn't be too hyped to see that there was that many, if you had it like vice versa, right? Like that many people in Alaska on the Clark Fork, you'd be like, what in the heck? Like, there's not that many fish. Like, but you could be like, okay, I'm going to take a turn running down it, and then you follow me back. Like, everyone could catch a fish. It's just, that's how crazy it is.
Yeah. And it's funny too. Like you talking about just how many people are out there, people come out to like those fly out lodges and pay, like thousands and thousands of dollars for a week of fishing. And, they fly out to like some river and there's like 20 or 30 or 40 other boats on it and all airplanes taking off and landing. And they're like, what? Where do all these people come from? And you're just like, the same thing as you're trying to do out here. But, there's, like you said, there's so many fish and so much water that it's usually not that big a deal.
Yeah, I think that, exactly. There is so many fish, and the Kenai is huge too. So like, it can obviously host that many people, but it does, I think, you have this image in your mind of what you're going to go to Alaska, and you're like, I'm going to be like the only person. And there's going to be this picture of me with the mountains behind me. But then you're like, there's a picture of me, and there's some anglers over here to the left and a little bit to the right. And let me just, it still beautiful. If, don't let that obviously deter you from your adventures going to Alaska. But it was just like one of those things. No one told me that everyone likes to go to Alaska too. Yeah. But let's talk about, Brett, because you have a lot going on at Tailout Angler. It's really cool. You're based in Seattle. I want to learn more about your operation. Let's start off with the bread and butter. What are you doing up there?
I guide, multiple fisheries. Kind of depends on, the season. So you kind of got to chase the fish through the seasons. Most of what I do is guiding for sea run cutthroat in Puget Sound.
So cool. I needed to learn more about this. I've never done that before. Can you go a little bit more into detail? How do you target these fish?
So it's trout fishing, but it's in saltwater, and they do run up the rivers, and you can catch them in the rivers, and that's really fun too. My backyard fishery is Puget Sound proper, like right out of Seattle. I mean, we catch, cutthroat. I kind of make a joke of this usually, but we catch cutthroat like within sight of the Space Needle. And it's trout fishing. We use 6-weight rods, and we fish small streamers, little bait fish patterns. And the cutthroat out there are native trout species. They're anadromous, just like a salmon or a steelhead. So they'll run up the rivers and creeks to spawn, and they'll spend a lot of time out in the saltwater, just chasing bait fish and shrimp and whatever. and I fish out of a boat, a power boat with a trolling motor. So we use that to control our drifts. And what's really unique about it is a protected saltwater fishery. So we don't deal like there's wind waves and that kind of thing and boat wakes and stuff, but there's no like swell. There's no big ocean waves or anything like that. So it's a really unique in that perspective. It's saltwater, but it's more like a lake, and
So cool.
there's a lot there's a lot of water there that's actually more like a river than a lake because of the tides. So the tides exchange twice a day here, and depending on where you're fishing, there are some areas that look, fully like a river with like riffles and rock gardens and drop offs and things like that. And you're drifting with the current, down these. And like I said, I use a trolling motor to control my boat, and casting at structure. And the water's really clear, and you're usually fishing in shallow water, no more than like, from a foot to 10 feet deep is really common. So you can see the bottom.
Wow.
You can see fish chase your fly. So we're not necessarily casting at a specific fish, but it is sight fishing in that you're casting at structure and you're watching fish come chase your fly and eat your fly, which is really, really cool and unique. And I love taking people from, the Midwest or the South or wherever that don't have any sort of barometer for what this kind of fishing is like. And, you're seeing seals and porpoises and eagles and deer. And if you're really lucky, you'll see orcas. It's just, and then, you turn around and you see the Olympics, or you see Mount Rainier, or you see the city.
The Space Needle.
Yeah. It's such a unique thing. And it's kind of an urban fishery because it's so close to Seattle and Tacoma, but it's also, if you get on the backside of some of these islands and stuff, or back in these little bays, it just looks like you're in the middle of nowhere. I see a few houses or whatever, but there's a lot of state parks and county parks where it's just huge swaths of undeveloped land. And the same is even more so around Hood Canal, which is just like the next waterway west of Puget Sound. But it's all kind of connected. But it's a unique fishery that I really enjoy, and it's you can do it from the beach too. It's much better from a boat. More get a lot more versatility, but a lot of people do it from the beach. A boat in saltwater is also a total pain in the ass, with all sorts of things that cost you a lot of money. Problems.
You know what they say about a boat? Bring out another 1,000. That's what it stands for.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's like if I wasn't making money with my power boat, I probably wouldn't have it. Which sounds stupid, but it's such a pain in the butt to keep a boat that you run in saltwater. Just keep it running and in good shape.
And also like just Seattle's weather. It's not even just on the water, right? You have to make sure that it's being taken care of out of the water.
Yeah, definitely keep it covered up at all times.
Yeah. I'm curious though, Brett. So like if you're targeting these trout, like how are you rigging your fly line? Like, because you could potentially catch anything.
Yeah. That's a good point I don't have, so this is kind of complicated, but I don't have a salmon charter license. Those are super expensive and you can't just buy one. There's a moratorium on new ones in the state. So you have to buy one from somebody who's willing to sell one to you, and they're tens of thousands of dollars. So the ROI on that for a fly fishing guide is not great. However,
that's like liquor license here in Montana.
Yeah.
They don't give them out. So they sell them for really, really expensive.
Yeah. And, but cutthroat are trout and a game fish, and Puget Sound is open year round for trout. And we do incidentally catch coho, occasionally, if you're really lucky, like a Chinook or, humpies, pink salmon in odd years. And, those are from, 8 inches to 8 pounds.
Right.
And that's, they live in the same water and they eat the same food. So yeah, you can catch kind of anything out there. If I'm out there fishing in 300 feet of water, somebody might report me for fishing salmon. But, you're fishing for cutthroat. And if you, run into a coho, that's always a fun, a fun, bycatch. But we catch sculpins out there. We catch flounder. We catch like piling perch. There's all sorts of weird stuff out there, like you're saying.
So cool.
And the lines we use, so we use 5 and 6 weight rods, trout rods. The lines we use are really specialty for streamer fishing. And I usually use a clear intermediate line. The one I really like is the Rio Coastal Quick Shooter. It's an integrated shooting head line that has a color change on it where the head and the running line meet.
Nice.
Yeah, and
I love those.
Yeah, it's awesome. And then sometimes we use faster sinking lines like the Rio Outbound or the Airflow 40 Plus, or I can't remember the SA line. It's one of their Titan sonar lines, but those are really great too. Can't remember the exact name of it. But yeah, so basically just a kind of a light shooting head that just allows people to cast further easier. And I have to, one caveat is I have taken people out that are like super green, and they catch fish. It's really, it's not a fishery that you have to be an expert at, but you have to have basic casting skills because you need to throw the line, 40, 50 feet or more. So if it's much better to do a float trip, or a walk and wade trip or something, which I also do in the summertime, just to slow that pace down a little bit. If you're a rank beginner. And I do a lot of instruction too. I love teaching people who've never picked up a fly rod before. But the Puget Sound thing requires a little bit of casting skills, but by no means do you need to be a experienced, seasoned veteran.
But you might as well, you do need to learn that you have to at least cast.
Yeah.
You don't want to go out there for the first time like, I've never touched a fly rod before. Like, where do you want me to cast this?
It gets a little tough. But we also catch, like I said, we catch fish in shallow water, and we catch fish, sometimes literally at the boat. They'll chase the fly. You'll watch them, and they'll eat it like right at the stern of the boat, or they'll get spooked and swim away. But it's amazing how sometimes when they want that fly, you're not going to take it away from them. You can't strip it fast enough. They're like, it's pretty wild when they smash that fly.
That's like my favorite thing is watching the fish come and like chase the fly, whether it's an eat or not. But sometimes you're just like, when you see it coming, like for here in Montana, we can see the smallmouth or like pike, because it's like so clear and you see it. And sometimes the fish will just like, obviously come straight to the boat and then turn around, and you're just like, oh my gosh, but how cool was that to see that fish really doing its instinct, just its nature,
predatory.
And it's so cool to see that. So sometimes even when you don't even catch a fish, I'm like, that was awesome. That was so cool.
That's very similar to here too. You get a lot more action than you get fish in the net. So the percentage of fish you see or grab your fly or you hook and get off to like fish in the net is, I'm not going to say it's low, but it's not like, 80% of the fish you see you're going to put in the net. But it's, it's half, or less depending on the day. But yeah, like you said, it's super cool to see those fish come chase your fly, to grab at that fly. Just see their predatory instincts is a lot of fun, I think.
So you can do this though all year round.
Yeah. The area I fish is, there's fish around all year. My high season is kind of like April through November. We can, the weather gets a little sketchy, especially if somebody's traveling from out of town. I wouldn't recommend to be in the winter or spring. But there are other areas of Puget Sound down south that are amazing during like January, like middle of winter. Super, super good fishing. It's just the geography and the hydrology and just the way the fish behave and just how they migrate kind of changes depending on where you are in Puget Sound.
They just sound like they're a little bit moody, just like sometimes Seattle can be. The weather can be in Seattle.
Yep.
They match the weather in Seattle.
Yeah.
Well, then I'm curious then, Brett. So we also have this hosted trips. So how are you able to manage doing that? And also, let's ask this, like, how do you make time to do these hosted trips? Because you go everywhere. Like go to the website and check out these places. We were just talking about Ishkalak, which you just said that you just came back. I don't know how are you able to do it all?
Well, first of all, I have a wife with a regular paycheck who's very understanding of a man who is not meant for a, desk job 9 to 5 kind of thing. As much as time as I do spend at the computer.
Funny. Yeah.
But
You know that they say behind a good man is an even better one.
yeah, or behind any fishing guide is a good spouse of, with a steady paycheck. And,
Well said.
it's such maybe it's a little off course, but it's, with COVID and all the weather related things. And, like last year I broke my wrist in the spring. I was out for 2 months. And they closed some of our steelhead fisheries, which actually affected other guides more than it did me, but it still affected me quite a bit. There's a lot of sort of unknown, I mean, same in Montana with hoot owls and the floods in Yellowstone and all that.
Of course.
It's so unpredictable sometimes being a guide that I'm really fortunate to be able to have someone who, like if I'm out of commission or, for flooded rivers or whatever, like, oh, well, we're not going to lose the house. Like, that's
right.
important.
No, that's like, you need somebody who's really structured in that sense. Yeah, absolutely.
So that does translate to me being able to do hosted trips. And it's something I've done since, I can't even remember. My first hosted trip was like 2005, I want to say 5 or 6, maybe 7 to Alaska West up in Southwest Alaska. On the Connecticut River. And I was in my, mid 20s then. And I got some help from the guys. I worked at a fly shop then, Creekside Angling Company in Issaquah, Washington, for a long time, and still work with those guys. But they helped me out. One of the guys there was a manager of the camp and kind of was like, yeah, bring a few people and I can get you up there and, comp you a spot. And it kind of just opened my eyes to like, oh, I could do this and like go all over the place, And I've just, I've developed a loyal cadre of clients who like to travel with me. And even more in the last few years, quite a few more clients who just want to go travel and do fun stuff. And, balancing it is tough. I mean, I say it's tough, but it's like the dream job too, right? I mean, there's a lot harder things out there. But it does require.
No one's saying, "Oh, poor Brett."
Yeah,
poor Brett.
Nobody's feeling bad for me.
Yeah,
but it does require a lot of time, and there's a lot of headaches involved with deposits and people saying they want to go and then getting sick. Or I've had people. A friend of mine broke her foot like a month before a trip to Belize, and I was like, you're not getting money back. Like it's. I hope you have trip insurance, and she didn't, and I shouldn't say I hope you have trip insurance. I try and get all of my clients to do so, whether they do or not is up to them. But I was able to fill that spot, and a guy got a cheap trip out of it. And but it's there's a ton of headaches like that, and
you're kind of like a travel agent, right?
You are, yeah, and you're responsible for your clients. I take that very seriously. I want to book places for my clients that I want to go, but also that my clients are going to have fun, and I want to book with good operations. Like Jesse's operation at X Flats in Ishkalak is amazing. It's super, super cool. And honestly, the week we went, we had terrible weather, like cloudy and windy all week. And I had some people who had never flats fished before, and some people who were experienced, and everybody had a great time. Everybody had a good attitude. Everybody caught bonefish. So a bunch of people caught their first handful of bonefish. We chased permit, we chased triggers and tarpon and snook, but which was all tough due to the weather. But it was an awesome trip. Jesse's lodge is great, and I had people that were like, at the end of the week of tough fishing and tough weather, they were like, "Hey, so when do we get to come back here?" And I was just like, "Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I want to come back for sure." But it just working with places like that is awesome. And there's a lot of wonderful lodges out there. And there's certainly some sort of fly-by-night operations or, it's just people that are super spacey or whatever it is that, just are places that I wouldn't want to take my clients because it just makes my job harder. And, if you have bad food or if you have, like dirty, rooms or I don't know, whatever. I haven't really run into that much, if at all, but,
so how does that work out though, Brett? Like, so you're the host. Do you just reach out to these places and then you're the travel agent, but then can you go there and then you fish with their outfitting business. Is that how
Yeah.
that works?
Yeah. I'm essentially a client, and
Okay.
I like, they have a program where, you book X amount of people. Usually it's book, 5 and 6 goes for free, or 7 and 8, or 9 and 10, or whatever it is. And that person gets to go for free, and, it could be, and usually there's a commission involved, so I can make a little bit of money.
Well, because you're also doing all the work, like
Yeah. And
booking flights and
yeah. And it's not unlike what, Yellow Dog does, or Fly Water, but it's obviously on a one-man scale. I'm not sort of, as much as it would be great to do that full time, I'm not like advertising like, hey, Brett's travel service, like, everybody from around the world, call me and I'll send you somewhere. It's something for my clients and for me, to go travel together and do all this, fun stuff, and go fishing cool places. I'd love to expand that if I could, and, book more trips with more people. But it's like I said, it's I want to go cool places. My clients want to go places, and I want to take them there and show them a good time, and they trust me. And that's really the bottom line. Is I've got, a loyal clientele who trust me to take them to a fun place, that even if you have bad weather all week, is still going to be a place that has great food and good accommodations, and is in a beautiful setting, and, has good guides that work hard. All the things that you can control. And then just, you're always rolling the dice with weather, and that's just, that's fishing.
I mean,
And
that's 100% fishing.
yeah,
I was kind of going back to, you said that there was a lady who canceled her trip and you had the opening. And I mean, I've been on Instagram where someone's like, hey, last minute, someone canceled. We're going to this destination. And sometimes I'm like, dude, maybe I should do it. But my biggest hesitation to ever wanting to do that is like, who are these people? Will I like them? Will they like me? How will I fit with this group? How do you manage like your groups? Are you just like take anybody, or will you make a phone call and be like, are you a good fit for us? Like, yeah, how does that work?
yeah. I mean, I'm, I guess, lucky enough to. I mean, I don't want to say I'm like, I've been doing this for 40 years, and I'm not booked out like 3 years in advance, kind of thing. But
Which you are booked though. I looked on your
I'm
website. It's
booked.
like all full, all full, all full. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
man, guess I'm not going to go to Tarponville.
That was
would
a
have been
really fun trip.
Yeah, that looked amazing.
And we caught permit then too, which was also incredible.
So crazy.
Yeah, it's it's with all my trips are with clients that I've already fished with pretty much. And there's certainly some newer people. Like, I'm taking a group to Cuba in February of next year, and we have, including me, 18 people. And that trip kind of
Holy
exploded
smokes.
on me. And I have actually a co-host now who's a buddy of mine, who's a rep around here, who's helping me with some of the stuff. And we also have a booking agent, because Cuba is just weird, and, with all the travel restrictions and stuff. And I have a
it
guy
only opened up not too long ago. Like, wasn't that during the Obama? So
yeah. And I have a buddy of mine who I've known a long time, who I trust, who does that for a living. So he's kind of the liaison to the outfitter, and I'm the liaison to all my clients. And so that helps when I can't, it's a lot harder to go direct to a lodge, with in Cuba. But yeah. And, I've there's a couple of these guys I haven't met, but I know, they sort of join the group because of other people who I know and who I trust. And honestly, as much as, I have so many stories, and every guide does, about, the nightmare client. But it's like, that's so much more rare than we as guides, want to complain about. I mean, I can be as cynical as anybody else, but there's so many clients who are just so, wonderful to be around, and are great people, and really just want to go fishing and have a good time. And with travel, as long as you understand that shit happens, and you gotta, when you're in Central America, or, wherever, like, things just run a little differently than they do, in New York City, or, Seattle, or whatever. So you just gotta have people that are willing to go with the flow, and know that, you're trying to do the best you can. And when something goes sideways, you're just going to make the best of the situation, and the lodge is going to help you out, and, the guides are going to work hard. And so
but I imagine you're not getting people who are like, I'm going to spend all this money, and I'm a beginner fly angler.
Not usually. There's it goes back to Alaska. My lodge manager always had this saying, people would get off the airplane and be like, wow, this is great. Like, never done spay casting before, but like, this sounds great. And he would go, hey, Larry, you like golf? Oh yeah, I golf all the time. You go, yeah. You ever played Augusta? No. Like that, I mean, that would be, a lifetime, and he'd go, well, if you got invited to Augusta, do you think you'd practice a little bit beforehand? He'd go, oh yeah, man, I'd be hitting balls every day, this and that. And he goes, well, you're at Augusta, bud. Good luck. And the guy kind of like look at him. And my lodge manager's a total funny, kooky guy. And so this
Love those guys.
Yeah, if you knew him, this is like right up, right spot on for him. But the guy kind of look around and be like, huh, okay. We teach him how to spay cast, and he'd catch some fish, and it'd all be fine. But
you're also like spending that much money. Like I that always kind of blows my mind because also, I mean, always a great time to learn, but I couldn't imagine like booking somebody to take me fishing and be like, so I didn't practice any of my double haul. I didn't do my spay casting because I'm like, Justin's really working with me and trying to get the spay cast dialed, because there's nothing more embarrassing than like doing you're like, as I'm doing my spay cast and like doing my loop and then like launching it and it's like like right in front of your feet. Like, God, this is embarrassing. Like, I hope nobody's watching me. And then of course there's the boat, I'm always doing it at the boat ramp for some reason. And there's a pile of people looking at me. I'm like, yeah, you like that? You want to come out here and show me? Because I'm the only one doing it. But yeah, I mean, practice makes, doesn't make perfect, but you can get a little bit better when you get
you'll
to the
never
elements.
master it, but yeah, it's practice makes better. And like you said, you're spending a lot of money and a lot of time. A lot of people just, they don't have lots of time to do this. So when they go on vacation, they want to, make the best of it. And practicing is good.
Well, let's just be honest. Those permit guides are like yelling at you. So you better have a thick skin.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, I've found in Belize and Mexico and Costa Rica and stuff, the guides that are permit guides, they often want to catch that permit more than you. And a lot of it is like bragging rights, to their fellow guides or, whoever. And, or in the Bahamas, like, the guide wants to catch a 10-pound bonefish, probably more than you, because that makes, that puts him in, high esteem with his colleagues, right? Or he can show that picture around and brag. And, so, but that also just makes those guides work that much harder, even if it is a selfish sort of thing. I mean, if they're into it, they're into it, and, that's like steelhead guides too. I do, kind of, it's a little different now. We've had a lot of problems with steelhead, but in the past and also now and in the future, I've guided summer steelhead and winter steelhead, and the Grand Ronde and the Skagit and the Olympic Peninsula. Just things have changed a lot in the last couple of years, but when swinging flies for steelhead is not easy. And, I want to catch that fish, and I often want to catch it more than my clients, because I'm putting my whole life into it. And, clients putting a day or two, and not to negate their, want to go do that. I mean, they're out there to have a good time and catch a fish and see, some new cool stuff. But, the dedication that a lot of guides, have put into it, and even more so than me. I mean, I know people who've moved, somewhere like, British Columbia or out to Forks or the Oregon coast or whatever to be a steelhead guide, to fish as much as possible. And, that dedication is pretty incredible. They love those fish, and they want to see them. They want to catch them. They want to get people into them.
Yeah. I mean, back to Justin's steelhead. It's the first steelhead I've seen in person. And
on the
when
anchor,
you look at that fish, it's really spectacular. Like, that fish, who's really big, made it. Like, I mean, that fish has probably gone through so much hardship to make it up to that point. And to think that one fish that you caught at that time, like, your paths met that fish who's already gone through, who knows what it's, gone through in the ocean, and it has somehow avoided being eaten or killed and then made it up to the river. That blows my mind. I'm like, that is a resilient fish. And the
Yeah.
fact that like you came across that fish's lifespan, I mean, and its journey up the river, that blows my mind. I think it's like the most unique thing that you can come across
It
that
is. I mean,
fish's life.
anadromous fish are, in my opinion, the most amazing creatures on the planet. I mean,
Yeah.
the survival rates, I'm not a biologist by any stretch, but I try and, I talk to a lot of biologists and I try and follow a lot of the, conservation stuff and all that and participate when I can. But for wild steelhead, the survival rates from fry to adulthood, like to return, are a lot of times like between 1 and like, if it's super, super good, like 7-8%. So like, 1%, 3 to 5% from what I understand is pretty common for a lot of places. And that varies across their range, if it's summer or winter and how far they have to travel and stuff. But
that is incredible. I mean,
it's super low.
Just saying that, like, I mean, you're holding a fish that it's beaten the odds and it's still going to try and beat the odds when you release it. Like its journey, like maybe it'll make it again, but most likely probably not. But you were part of that fish's story. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's just such a beautiful thing. But yeah, back to, I mean, steelhead, we could talk about steelhead all the time. I just find them to be so amazing. But you're also like kind of going out of your comfort zone from these like steelhead waters and really expanding your, exploring these waters. Like, how do you even figure out which destination you want to go? Is it based on like what you want to fish? Or you're like, you know what, I've heard that these people have a good operation. Do you first rely on outfitters and then location, or is it location and then let's figure out what's the best outfit for us?
It depends on, there's sort of several things. I mean, it depends on where I want to go and where my clients want to go. And it depends on, some places there's half a dozen outfitters in one town, right? Or like in Punta Allen in Ascension Bay, Mexico. But a lot of it is I have people who have told me about places or have been places and say, hey, this lodge is really awesome. Or, some places just have excellent reputations. Like, I've been to Turnif Flats in Belize, like, I think 3 times. And, they have an awesome reputation. They've been around a long time. And I know, multiple people that have been there. And it's, so I feel comfortable like contacting them and knowing that I'm going to get a good experience for my clients. And, like X Flats, Jesse, I knew a couple people that had been down there several times and were just like, hey man, this guy's got it dialed, so it's kind of word of mouth. He's got a
good personality too.
Oh,
so I feel like
awesome.
Both of you guys
super
would
fun.
mesh so well together because we've had him on the podcast and
we had a super fun time down there. The whole group did. And yeah, it just depends on it, word of mouth, reputation. I always want to talk to somebody who's been there, and then talk to the owner or the manager and kind of get a feel for it and see what their program is. Some places don't have hosted trip programs. They just don't have the margins, or they don't need to, if they're super duper booked, years in advance, they don't need to have hosted trip programs. So there's that too. And some of the places are more, like you book a hotel, you book some guides, and you have to put it together yourself, which is more work, but also enjoyable and rewarding. Like I'm taking a group back to New Orleans, or outside of New Orleans, in end of November this year to go red fishing. I did the same thing last year, and we rent a house and we get guides together, and we rent a car, and we actually do all of our own cooking. But I have a caterer who I use who designs a menu for us and like does all the shopping like online for us. So it just cuts down all this extra work and thought. And, she designs meals that we can cook that are super easy and simple when we get home and we're tired and all we need to do is have a beer and shoot a game of pool. So that kind of thing, again, it's a little more work, but it's also a lot of fun. It's a little more independent. You get, your group is just your group. There's no other people around. And so,
so say I was like, say I'm like, hey, Brett, I want to go on one of these hosted trips. Like, how would that process go? Would you, because obviously you're already pretty much booked for everything. Would we like have this conversation like the way that we're doing it now? And you'd be like, you know what, I think this is the best trip for maybe in 2 years from now or a
Yeah.
year from now, I'll start catering a trip that'll accommodate to you and like the group of people that you'll be with.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, that's basically how it goes. I have somebody I talk to, or, I'll talk to my like kind of loyal travelers and say, hey, I'm thinking about doing this one or this one or this one. Who's interested? And like right now, I'm kind of trying to figure out, winter, spring, like 20, what would it be, 23, 24, like for next winter. So I got 2 trips going this winter and trying to figure out what I want to do. And, I just heard that Christmas Island is going to be closed through 2022. So that kind of, and who knows when it's going to open back up now. It's been delayed so many times. So that kind of takes that off the menu. And that's kind of been on my list for a while. I want to do a peacock bass trip to Colombia, but
Yes.
Colombia they've essentially outlawed sport fishing, or may have. We don't really know how it's all going to play out. So that's a whole nother, thing. So
bag of worms that you're not ready to like just dive into quite yet.
Yeah. So I can't, I don't want to take my clients to like book a trip in Colombia, be like, oh yeah, come on down, spend all this money. And then like a year later be like, oh yeah, there's no sport fishing anymore. Like, sorry, your money's gone. Like it's like you're kind of talking about before, doing your due diligence and finding operations that are trustworthy and is really important. And if it's something too that somebody's like, hey, I want to go sooner, or I want to go on a different, like I've already got a trip that's booked or whatever, I can send someone to a lodge that I know is a good lodge or a place I've been to before, and I can contact the lodge and act as that travel agent for them. I've got several fly shops I work with to get people geared up, depending on what they need for the trip, and that lodge will usually give me a commission for that. So there is a financial incentive as well.
Well, I mean, also you are doing a lot of the work and you're finding people like, can't do everything for free. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
definitely.
I think that's so well worth it. So you do have to put in your books. I do. Okay. These are my list of 3 things I would love to do, Brett. So think of me.
Yeah.
I want to go somewhere warm. I'd love a fighting fish. I'd love to do the peacock bass or tarpon. Never caught, obviously, either one of them. So, and my skill level is I feel like I'm intermediate. Like I can do a double haul, and I'm learning to do some trout, doing some spay casting. So I can practice in that time. If you can give me like a year or 2, but that'd be my list of things I'd like to do.
Yeah. Well, then we'll take you to the place I'm going in February. We'll just go to Cuba next year. And
my gosh.
They have year round, they have juvenile tarpon from like 5 to 25 pounds in the mangroves. And
first off, I'd love to go to Cuba. I just think the culture there looks amazing, like so bright, so colorful. Like everyone's just, the music, everything. Sign me up for Cuba. If you actually do that, please put a spot for me and Justin. We both would love to do something like that.
Yeah, we can totally talk about it later. I can almost guarantee this won't be my last trip to Cuba. It's such a spectacular place, and I know so many people that have been there, and people that go back like year after year too. I mean, that have just fallen in love with it. So I'm really excited to do this trip.
That's also on my bucket list of places to go. So Brett, if people are wanting to actually book, maybe they want to go fishing with all of us together for this Cuba trip. What's the best way for them to, or maybe they want to go steelhead fishing or sea trout,
Sure.
There's so many options that you can provide. You can, like, anybody who probably calls you can find a specific place that would be a good fit for them. What's the best way for them to do that?
The best way is probably to check out my website. It's tailoutanglers.com. I've got all of my trips and descriptions and instruction and on there and all sorts of stuff. There's a few videos like you'd mentioned. And then all my contact info is on there too. Brett, BRETT at tailoutanglers.com is my email. That's usually the best way to get a hold of me because I'm on the water a lot and I can respond, thoughtfully when I get home at night. And I've got Instagram. That's my only like real social media. It's just at Tailout Anglers. And if you want to see a picture of my, what we were talking about before we started recording, my destroyed truck. I
was just about to say, if you go onto his Instagram, everyone know that Brett is okay because, like you said, your truck is destroyed because of.
Yeah, I hit an elk last week on I-90 going driving to the Yakima River really early in the morning, trying to get the early morning stonefly, dry fly bite, and hit an elk, a full-grown cow elk, and I don't have any word on my truck if they're going to total it or not yet, but it is pretty hammered. And there's a video on my Instagram of all the damage, and luckily my boat was okay.
It hit your windshield was totally destroyed. How did you, when that impact happened, how did that feel? Because it looks like
awful.
Yeah,
awful.
like seatbelt burns, recommend. Everything. Yeah, seatbelt burn.
No, I mean, it kind of, maybe this is kind of gross, but I hit a soft object and it kind of it was obliterated. So while it was a huge impact, and it shattered my windshield and my driver's door and tore my mirror off and damaged the whole driver's side of my truck. The elk was in a bunch of pieces all over the road.
Oh my gosh.
And I was doing like 60 or 62 or something like that on the freeway, towing my boat. I wasn't going super fast. It was dark. I'm towing a boat on, going over a mountain pass, and something I do all the time. But and I mean, it's just like a bomb went off, when the windows exploded, and I was able to pull over quickly. And, I was covered in glass head to toe. I was spitting glass out, it was in my mouth. And I just had a few little cuts on my forehead and a little cuts on my hand. But I didn't know, what the damage was I didn't know if I'd broken bones or if I was spurting blood and couldn't see it. So I crawled out of my truck, and it's dark, like dark. And I'm just, doing the pat down, seeing if all my bones are working in joints and limbs. And I see a little bit of blood, but I can't, I don't know what's going on. I can't tell.
You're in shock.
Totally. Yeah. And this guy pulls over and he goes, "Hey man, is that all your stuff in the road?" And I was like, "I don't know." I was like, there's an elk in the road I just hit. And I was like, my oars, my anchor, my cooler, who knows what's in the middle of the road, right? Like, I know I have my boat, but that's about it.
Because were you meeting clients to take people fishing?
Yeah. I was meeting clients in like, an hour after that or whatever. And it's like I tried to call 911 to get, the troopers to come out, because I didn't know what was in the road, and cars could be hitting that or whatever. And I didn't really know if I needed an ambulance, which I didn't, luckily. And I was like, "Hey, can you call 911? Like, my phone's not going through." It took me like 6 times to get through. And he goes, "Yeah, sure." And he just like walks back to his truck and gets in and drives away. I was like,
what?
I was like, "Okay, dude, thanks for the help."
What? Is this like, was he obviously Seattle? I told you they're a little moody. I've been to Seattle. Some people are moody. Not all of the Seattle people. Not like you, Brett.
Actually, there was several people. I was there for hours because I was waiting for a tow truck, and it got light out and everything. And my buddy came and got my boat for me and took it to his house, and was waiting for a truck, and several people pulled over just to see if I was okay, because they saw the carnage on the road and saw me, a smashed up truck just sitting there. So that was really encouraging.
You look at that video, Brett, I would think that someone died.
I think I'm lucky that I was in a big truck and not essentially unhurt. It could have been so much worse, and I feel very fortunate to have just walked away.
So how did that phone call go with your clientele? Were you like, "Hello, this is Brett"?
I texted him after I talked to the trooper and insurance, and I was like, "Hey man, like, not going to make it, hit an elk." And I didn't hear back, and I called him, left a message, didn't hear. And I just don't know if he got any of them, or he was driving too. And he texts me and he's like, "Hey, I'm here. I'll see you in a minute." And I was like, so I called him again. I was like, "Hey man, sent you a text and an email or a voicemail. I guess you didn't get it." I was like, "I hit an elk. I'm not making it." He's like, "Dude, I saw you on the way over." And I was like, "Oh, okay."
He wasn't the guy that was like, "Did you leave anything? Sorry, I gotta go. Yep, I'm calling 911.
Yeah, right?
I gotta go fishing though."
Yeah, no, it wasn't him. But he didn't know what my truck looked like or whatever. But he was like, "I didn't put 2 and 2 together." But he goes, "I saw the boat. I saw the truck." He's like, "Oh man." And then he also saw me on the way back, because I was still sitting there. I was sitting there for hours waiting for a tow truck. But
he just honks his horn, beep, beep, "Hi, Brett."
Yeah, exactly. And my sister-in-law saw me. Several friends of mine saw me when I posted that Instagram. They were like, "That was you on the side of the road?" And I was like, "Yeah."
Oh gosh, Brett, that is horrible. I mean, what a good way. I mean, I'm glad that you are safe, but it's just one of those experiences too that, I don't know, probably puts everything in perspective, and you probably appreciate going down to Cuba and all these experiences, because not like the guy with the dildo, like, I could die right now on this mountain, but but yeah, I think it's one of those things that when you have life experience like that, you kind of probably in the moment you're like, okay, what do I do next? But I'm sure it probably settles in like that could have been hell a whole lot worse.
Yeah. Yeah. It puts things into, a little bit of perspective for sure. It could, I'm extremely fortunate to have walked away from that. It was not a good time.
Like we said,
not at all.
Like we said earlier, when I was working at the bar and there was an ER doctor, I was like, what is one recommendation? He's like, don't have a motorcycle. I've seen this is like in rural Montana. And he's like, because I've seen so many motorcycles, not just get in car accidents, but hit wildlife. And he's like, there's no recovering that. I'm like, oh, enough said.
No, there's nothing to protect you.
Yeah, nothing. Like leather isn't going to stop something like that from an animal hitting you, especially something. Anyways. But I can't thank you enough, Brett, for joining me today and sharing your stories. And I really do want to get to Cuba. Like, let's make that happen. Yeah. And also, actually, listening about the sea trout, that is something I've never done before. And I would love to do something like that. So, and Seattle's only I think it's only 9-hour drive from Missoula. So maybe I'll get that.
I drive your direction all the time.
Well,
from Missoula, it's 7 hours.
Is it 7 hours? I thought so too.
Yeah.
Let's make this happen. You come fishing with us in Missoula. Jess and I will come out to Seattle.
Go to thefebruaryroom.com where you can access a complete library of our podcast and read more about our guests, their fishing stories, and favorite fly patterns. We're always looking for exceptional fly fishing yarns, and if you have one to spin, shoot us an email at info@thefebruaryroom.com. The February Room is always free, but if you feel like throwing a nickel in the pond, we appreciate any additional listener support. For companies and individuals interested in sponsorship opportunities, please contact us for our media kit. Thanks for stopping by the February Room, and we'll see you down here next week.